Everybody, welcome to Bill Whittle Live on Monday, the 7th of March. And today we've pretty much got one topic, I think, that's going to keep us busy for half an hour. It's going to be a disciplined half hour this time for the total show. And that question is pretty simply this: is there, in fact, some evidence of an actual slow motion coup going on here in the United States of America? I know that sounds like a lot, like it's a big statement to make, but we have some evidence to back it up. And at the very least, we have some history to back it up. So all day today, we're going to be talking about this wiretapping and whether or not it's indicative of something much bigger and deeper. And we'll get right to it because it's a busy day and this is a disturbing topic. Here we go. Push the button, Neil. Is this latest wiretapping allegation that Donald Trump has made about Barack Obama tapping his phone lines prior to the election, is this part of other pieces that fit together and form something very disturbing? Certainly something I've never seen the likes of, or even imagined I would see the likes of here in American politics. That is the question. So for those of you who know me and known the work I've been doing for a while, you people know how mortified I am, and terrified is probably a better word, of I'm paranoid about being paranoid. I think it's so easy to become paranoid. It's so easy to just basically drift into the abyss of all of these theories and speculations and all the rest of it, when in fact we really need to stick to the facts. And this is what I find disturbing about this particular case. There are some facts here that I was going to talk about anyway, and they all seem to be lining up in a way that I don't think is coincidence, and which I am quite sure is not good for democracy. So let's look at some of these elements. I have to tell you before, as just sort of an overview, I may have misunderestimated Barack Obama. I knew he wasn't going to just go quietly into the good night, because that would require some class and some respect for American traditions and all the rest. So I wasn't terribly surprised to find out that he's not only not gone away, he's just sticking around. And I had thought, to be honest with you, that basically Obama would be here on Oprah. That's what I expected. I expected that he personally wouldn't want to leave the scene, and so we'd see him on talk shows and we'd see him on all the rest of this stuff. But as I say, I may have misunderestimated this guy. He is quite possible that he's not leaving, and he's not leaving because he doesn't think he can leave the government. And the entire idea of the American presidency, the entire idea of it is under assault here. It's not just decorum, It's not just a decorum issue. It's not required in the Constitution, but it's not just decorum. When a president is finished with his 2 terms or 1 term, he leaves Washington, gets the hell out of there, keeps his mouth shut, and lets the next guy do his job. That is what has been happening essentially since there's been a republic. I know there's been 1 or 2 exceptions, but at least for modern history, that's what happened. So, first of these data points is Barack Obama doesn't retire to Chicago, probably because he's worried he'll be, shot on the streets there because of his policies and because of his former campaign manager, Rahm Emanuel's running of his city. So he's not going back to Chicago. So he rents a house in D.C. That seems a little odd. The man doesn't seem to have many friends. In certain fact, we know that, when he was not actually doing the work of the president, which I haven't seen much of during his 8 years, he was golfing all around the world. It's not like D.C.'s got any particular appeal for him, so he doesn't seem to have an awful lot of friends either. So why would he stay in D.C.? Put that aside. Again, any one of these points on their own don't really make much. They're not that condemning, but when you put them all together, you've got quite a pattern here. The next thing we find out a couple days ago is that Valerie Jarrett, one of the worst people ever to hold office, even appointed office in the United States of America. It's either Valerie Jarrett or Susan Rice, but I'm pretty sure it's Valerie Jarrett, was the person who advised Bill Clinton, President Clinton, not to take the shot on Osama bin Laden back in the late 90s. Valerie Jarrett is well known well, she's just sympathetic to the Iranian cause because she's descended from Iranians. It seems reasonable to me. But the idea that your former chief of staff is going to move into your house, he's not talking about she's going to get an office in Barack Obama's office. She's going to move into the house, in a wing of the house, and Valerie Jarrett's going to be there with Barack Obama. That's a little weird. Can we all agree? That's just a little odd. If George Bush had retired had basically gone home, which he did after his 2 terms, and then you find out that, Condoleezza Rice was going to be staying at the house indefinitely, or Donald Rumsfeld was going to take a room upstairs, you would just start to think it's just a little odd. A little bit odd. But the real damning stuff, I think, came from Eric Holder. Eric Holder said not too long ago in big, bold capital letters, he said, he's coming back. He's coming back. Who's coming back? We know who's coming back. He's coming back. He's going to be a lot more active than he was before. He's coming back strong, and just hang on there and wait. He's going to be back in a moment. So, coming back from when? I mean, for God's sakes, when you make a comeback, it's usually after you've been out of the business for, 2-3 years, 4 years. How can you have a comeback tour? The Beatles break up, and then 2 weeks later or 2 months later, they're going to have a big reunion tour. It stinks. There's something wrong with it. He's coming back. He's coming back into politics. There's no law that says he can't get into politics, but there's no laws about a lot of other things, too, that are American traditions, which the Democrats like to stomp on. For example, the filibuster rule. Harry Reid needed a little vote. It wasn't a terribly major thing. He decided to go nuclear, which means he's basically going to destroy the filibuster, which was just simply nothing more than just good manners. It was simple comedy, not comedy, comity on the part of the Senate. And basically, he threw it away to get a cheap vote, so now that precedent is gone, and now he's paying the price for it. So Barack Obama will not leave Washington. This is true. Valerie Jarrett has moved in with Barack Obama, which doesn't sound like the kind of thing that might be, I'm planning a nice retirement here in D.C., or maybe I'm going to open, maybe I'll open the Barack Obama Library, or, it's going to be in Chicago, apparently. And so what? And then Eric Holder comes out screaming, he's coming back real big, don't you worry about that. So there's that. Then there's all of these leaks that are coming out of nowhere regarding Sessions and so on. And I don't know where they're coming from. I'm sure somebody knows where they're coming from. I frankly do not see the problem here. I just don't. I don't see the problem with anybody on the level of just Jeff Sessions having a conversation with somebody from the Russian government or anything else. It's not like Sessions was horse trading the way Hillary Clinton was for money, and it's not like Sessions was horse trading the way Barack Obama was for politics. We may remember that open mic night just the other, it seems like it was 1,000 years ago, it was probably 5, where just before the election in 2012, there's a hot mic on, and Barack Obama's sitting there with the Russian ambassador. They're talking about the missile defense that he was about to pull out of Poland, and basically Barack Obama said, please, after the election, the 2012 election, I'll have more flexibility. In other words, I have to look tough now, but don't you worry, I will be much, much more easy to deal with after the election. And the Russian ambassador says, I will inform Vladimir. That is a sitting president, saying, listen, give me some 6 months apiece so I can win this election. Then after that, we can make a deal. This is a real, genuine concern. This is genuine power trades for political gain. Ted Kennedy wrote to the Soviets and basically said, Ted Kennedy said, we have to do something to stop this Ronald Reagan. That's an actual genuine act of treason and outrage. I do not understand what this whole business with Sessions is all about. I don't get it. I don't. And in any event, here we go. So what can we speculate about without losing our minds? This is an important thing to me, this business about not losing my mind. It's real important. I don't want to be a guy who's, believes in nonsense because I'm so frustrated by the truth. The truth is terrifying enough. You don't need conspiracy theories. The truth is scary enough. So What can we assume from all of this? Well, I think it's fair to say that when Barack Obama's former website now becomes, first it was Organizing for America, and then it is barackobama.com, and now it's Organizing for Action or something like that. I think it's Organizing for Action. What Barack Obama is doing is he is setting up a subversive government underneath the government with paid protests in order to protest policies that he implemented and the American people threw out. They just chucked his entire ideas out. And they didn't just chuck it out once. Barack Obama comes into office in 2008, and people like me said, I don't know, the guy was raised by feral communists. I know enough about his background. I know about the Little Red Schoolhouse in Mercer Island, and I know about Frank Marshall Davis, and I know about all this stuff. But you know what? Maybe those were the indiscretions of a guy in the Choom gang. I'm hoping, this was just the night of the election, I'm hoping that I'm wrong about him and that he stands up and is a great president. Well, guess what? No, turns out that's not the case. It's not the case at all. And he will not simply go away. So the American people said, I don't know. The founders of this country designed the Congress, in a very specific way. I've been reading an awful lot about Athens and ancient Greece, thanks to Victor Davis Hanson's amazing works. I'm on his third book now. I'm chain smoking these books, chain reading them. But basically, here's what it comes down to. The Athenians, in their open democracy, had a full democracy in terms of at least everybody in the city got to vote. Every male got to vote. So basically, you'd have an assembly of 8,000 people, and they would raise their hands. Do we want to go to war with Sparta? Yes. Do we want to invade Sicily? Yes. And it's this mob that would take Athenian generals and execute them. You didn't win the battle, so we're going to execute you. Or we're a little suspicious the way you picked up prisoners, or you left Greek sailors in the water, so we're going to execute you. This is what the mob does. That's what a democracy does. These are the things that the Democrats are counting on, because if you have an open, every time they ruin the protections of a republic, they do it in the name of democracy. We're going to take the power away from the states and give it to the people. That's what we're going to do. We're pro-democracy. No, you're going to take away the power of the states in order to centralize the federal government. The people already have a house. It's called the House of Representatives. But my point is, the founders understood that if we give the House of Representatives very short terms, 2 years for everybody, but we give the Senate very long terms, 6 years for everybody, then what we're going to have is we're going to have a balance between what the people want versus something to stop these runaway mobs of people who just get this idea in their head and just go marching off after some demagogue. So that's pretty much what happened, in my opinion. Thought it worked rather well, as a matter of fact. They meet a guy with a big smile, and he comes down from Chicago, and he's going to be, he appears in his Greek, speaking of Athens, appears in front of the Greek temples, and he's the light worker, and he's the one who's the Messiah. He's going to bring hope and change to America. Hope for what? Change what? No, it doesn't say, because if you say things, you're going to find out that the two people sitting next to each other who both want hope and change completely different things. So what happens after that? He becomes president. We realize pretty soon that he's not going to be the guy we hoped he would be. He's going to be the guy that we knew he would be. And so what happens? Well, in 2009, after this man begins to try to take over healthcare, which is, if the government owns the health of the American people, if you have to go through the government to stay alive, then this is why we oppose. One of many reasons why we are so many conservatives are deadlocked set against Obamacare, and why we want it repealed. It is not just a question of the economics, although it certainly is that. It's not just a question of the fact that the rates tripled, although it's certainly that. It's not just a question of the fact that you now need an insurance policy to pay the deductible on your Obamacare insurance policy. It's that too. But if the government has the switch that controls whether you live or die, if the government is the single point of failure, where you have to basically justify your existence, and the federal government, as they do in Canada, this happens in Canada and happens in Britain all the time. If the Canadian government decides that your cancer is terminal, and that there's either no cure for you, or the cure is unlikely, and that you're not worth the financial risk, then you simply get your pain medication and are sent home to die. I know this first person because I spoke at length to a guy who ran a cancer clinic in Ottawa, and he basically said, listen, I get calls every day from people saying, the National Health Service is giving me my morphine to go home and die. Is there any hope for me anywhere? And this guy told me, Canadian doctor, ran a lab, said, in America, there's always some hope. He said, there's somebody at the University of Tennessee with the kind of cancer you've got, and he's getting 20% survival rates. Not a good number, but it's better than nothing. And he gets calls all the time from people and relatives and friends of people and relatives that go to him after the federal government in Canada has said, no, you're done, you're finished. It's over for you. You're not a cost-effective option for us anymore. I don't want to live that way. I don't want to live that way in Great Britain, where people have to sit in hospitals and drink the water out of flower vases because they haven't been attended to in 4 days. I don't want those survival rates. You want to talk about American healthcare? You want to talk about whether it's good healthcare or not? You look at the survival rates. Look at the cancer survival rate. You look at the survival rate for any treatable disease, and we are 4 times ahead of the next closest socialist paradise healthcare system. 4 times. So I don't want the government being able to say to me or anybody else I care about, hey, you know what, sorry, we did the tests, and this is what happens to 89% of other people. Therefore, we've determined that it's not a good risk in terms of the finances for you to get the treatment that you need. Go to hell. You know what? Go to hell. I'm not going to let that happen, and neither are you. So we start to see this happening in Obama's first year in 2009, and all of a sudden people are already in the streets with the Tea Party movement. Now, how do we know that the Tea Party movement was an actual grassroots movement and not paid for by the Koch brothers, as the critics of the Tea Party like to attest? How do we know? Well, there's 2 ways that we can know, and they're both pretty reliable ways of knowing. The first way we know that the Tea Party movement was an actual grassroots movement is actually very simple. The Tea Party is obviously, self-evidently part of a grassroots movement because our posters are so terrible, because the posters are so awful, because they're so unreadable. And they're unreadable and terrible posters because they're made by individual people, not by professional graphic artists, and then printed out in large numbers. You look at a protest for international answer back in the mid-2000s during the Iraq War, and you will see an entire line of people on the streets. They're all wearing the same t-shirts, and they're carrying the same signs, the exact same signs. They're striking black letters on a yellow background or a red background or whatever. That's AstroTurf. Somebody's paying for those signs. Somebody had to buy the signs. Somebody had to buy the t-shirts, and somebody had to organize the fact that somebody had to make a call and say, I need 6,000 red t-shirts with a picture of Mao on the front. I need 5,000 posters that say the exact same thing with international answer across the bottom, a little URL. I need all of these things. Somebody has to organize it. And that means it's not an actual grassroots movement. Somebody's paying for those t-shirts. Somebody's paying for those posters. If you look at the current town hall meetings, this is the left wing counter to the Tea Party. You look at these town hall meetings where everybody's up on their hind legs screaming and yelling. Why is it, if this is an actual movement of the people, why do they all have the same signs? Why do they all have the same signs? Why does everybody in the room have one of 2 different signs? We love our ACA, big black letters. No, 4 people with that sign and 5 people with another sign. How did they get together? How did they get those signs distributed? Who paid for the signs? Is there one organization? Is this resistance of the Democrats? Is it one organization, or is it thousands and thousands of individual organizations like the Tea Party was? Thousands of them, which, by the way, were intimidated and targeted by the IRS from very early in Barack Obama's campaign. So we know what this guy's about. We know what he's about. There's no question that the IRS was weaponized against the Tea Party, which means that this president will do anything legal, illegal, immoral, whatever, for political power, for the progressive wing of the Democratic Party. He doesn't give a damn about institutions. He doesn't give a damn about the voice of the people. Doesn't give a damn about democracy. Doesn't give a damn about republic. He doesn't give a damn about anything other than power and his ideas. And if you believe this fig leaf, that guys like Barack Obama are doing this for the poor, then ask yourself, if that's true, if they're doing it for the poor, why is Barack Obama taking all of these unbelievably expensive golfing vacations and staying at the Hamptons and hanging out in places like that, and he's on the beach in Hawaii? If he's really for the poor, if I was really for the poor, if that was my primary mission in life, I would take a vacation in Chicago, and I'd work soup lines. If I was genuinely for the poor, that's what I would do. So, no, they're not for the poor. They don't give a damn about the poor. The poor and the needy people in this country, and those people do exist, those people exist as a simple excuse and as a fig leaf for these type of people to take our money. That's why they're there. That's their usefulness. That's why Our federal government now, of all the dollars we spend, $2 out of $3 go to pay people. 2 out of 3 of the money that we spend as the government, the federal government. Forget all the waste in the things that the government's supposed to be doing, and that includes things like Department of Energy and education, all the rest of this stuff that's not there and doesn't need to be there. Those are state or local problems. But even if you include all of that, include the National Park Service, include the Department of Defense, which does need to be there, include energy, include education, include housing and urban development, include the interior, all of this, put all of it together, and it turns out that that's about $1 out of $3 that we spend as a federal government. And the other $2 out of $3 don't run the government. They don't pay for any of the government. $2 out of $3 that we spend in the name of the federal government that they tax us for and borrow from, $2 out of $3 goes to entitlements. That's why it's called non-discretionary spending. In other words, we can decide not to buy a F-35 program. We can decide to pick up another Ford-class aircraft carrier or not. That's up to the people. That's up to the people of America as determined by their representatives in Congress. But non-discretionary spending means that 2/3 of the money that the federal government spends is not spent on anything that anybody has any voice over. It's an obligation. We owe people. We can't simply not pay them, because if we don't pay them, then God knows what would happen. First of all, there'd be riots in the streets and all the rest of it. And after that happened, people would start voting Republican again. We can't take these voters off of the dole. Are you kidding? The progressives there'd be 5% of the population would be voting progressive if they weren't paid for it. And when I say paid for it, I don't mean necessarily that George Soros writes them a check. They're paid for it with a check that gets written to them every single month. Every single month, the poor people in this country get paid a check to look the other way and vote Democrat. Is this clear enough for everybody? That's what they do. Why do I say look the other way? Because if they looked down and looked around themselves, they would see that they have now been, after 70, 80, 90 years, 100 years of Democrats running their inner cities in their interest, of course, needless to say. If they looked around at where these horrible crime problems are, if they looked around at the quality of life in these inner cities, they would realize that they're in a living hell. And then they would start to ask themselves questions like, wait a minute now, if we're in a living hell, how did we get here? It must be those Republicans' fault. They hate the poor and they hate black people. We've been told this all the time by our community leaders. Only Republicans haven't had anything to do with inner cities. Baltimore, Chicago, St. Louis, Atlanta, they have been governed by nonstop Democrats for 80 years. Not for 8 years, not for 8 years, for 80 years. I think Atlanta's been governed by nonstop Democrats, a Democratic mayor and a Democratic city council for something like 112 years, something like that. So you can't simply just take these people off the dole, because then they'd be free people and they'd have to get a job. And if they got a job, they'd be masters of their own destiny. And if they're masters of their own destiny, they wouldn't live in such a horrible situation. And if they didn't live in such a horrible situation, they wouldn't vote progressive anymore. So all of this power is at stake. All of it. And when Donald Trump won that election, it was an earthquake. It was a lightning bolt out of the blue. They thought that with 2 terms of Obama, we own the Justice Department. And folks, if you own the Justice Department, you don't have to own anything else. If you can put a lackey like Eric Holder or Loretta Lynch into the Justice Department, you don't have to own anything else. You don't have to control any other part of the government, because if it turns out that the IRS illegally, immorally, undemocratically, and all the rest targets conservative groups, then who's going to prosecute the members, the officials in the IRS who implemented those decisions? And who's going to prosecute all of the hundreds, if not thousands, of people who knew full well what was going on when they were either told or whatever, to not necessarily even told, when they were given their idea that, no, this is something we need to do? Who's going to prosecute them? The Justice Department's going to prosecute them. That's who, which means it's not going to happen. Who's going to look into climate data that the Department of Energy was basically trying to turn our entire economy into windmills and solar panels because of what? Who's looking into that data? Nobody. Who's making sure that the border is secure, and who is prosecuting people for violating the border? No one. The Justice Department is everything. They're not idiots, these people. So when I hear that a former president, 2 months after being out of office, term limited it out, who said, by the way, that he could easily defeat Donald Trump for a third term. When I hear a president like that is not only not respecting American traditions, but openly mocking them. He's not going back to Chicago the way George Bush went back to Texas, and the way Bill Clinton went back to Arkansas, and the way that Nixon went back to California. And no, and Jimmy Carter went back to Georgia. No, he's staying. Why? Because he doesn't want to give up power. That's why. Because power and money are everything to these people. And folks, I've said this before. I cannot say this again. Just think about this for a second. Just for a second. Don't ever forget this. If Barack Obama, the man, forget about his politics, if that man were not in politics, do you think that he would be able, through his own merit, to be able to fly to all of the most advanced golf courses in the world on a 4-engine 747 with a backup waiting behind him in case something goes wrong? Could Barack Obama do that without being a politician? Could Hillary Clinton be driven? If Hillary Clinton weren't in politics, if Hillary Clinton were in the makeup business, or she worked for Neutrogena, let's say, or Johnson & Johnson, or maybe Hillary Clinton worked for, she was a part of AT&T, maybe board of directors or whatever. It's just Hillary Clinton's not ever met Bill. She's just Hillary Clinton. She didn't go the political route. Do you think that she would go 25 or 30 years without a driver's license, being chauffeured around in limousines? Do you think without politics that Hillary Clinton would have armed bodyguards that she could throw books at and smash things over and tell them to F off in the morning? Do you really think that any of these people could accomplish that? No. You may not like Donald Trump, but I'll say this about Donald Trump. I'll say many things that I do like about Donald Trump. Donald Trump does get to travel around and go golfing on the best golf courses in the world. And Donald Trump does get to fly in a private jet. And Donald Trump is surrounded by members of an elite security squad dedicated to protecting him. And the thing that's interesting and different between Donald Trump and Barack Obama is Donald Trump had these things before he went into politics. Before he went into politics, he had earned those things. You don't have to like Trump. It's okay. It doesn't matter if you like Trump or not. I don't think Trump cares whether you like him or not. I've had major problems with the guy. I'll continue to have major problems with him. But when I see Trump towers next to the White House, and I know that the Trump towers were built by Donald Trump, and I see, what did Obama have before he became president of the United States? Nothing. He handed out forms. He went through streets. He was writing on blackboards in little tiny schoolrooms and handing out forms to people. Donald Trump, I have some belief, is more immune, not completely immune, but more immune to the pressures of corruption. That he's more immune, I think, to the power of corruption. And the corrosive power of Washington is very simple. If somebody gave you a checkbook that had no limit, none. If you had a checkbook that you could write for any amount of money in the world, and it would be good, they'd make good on it. You just present them a check. Here's paid to the order of inner city residents, 1,220,634, 1,622,435,000,000 and 00 cents. You wrote a check like that, and you gave it to people, and it was cashed, and it was good. The check didn't bounce. What do you think that would do to you? What do you think it would do to you? If you had a checkbook or a credit card that had no limits, none, what would you be doing in a year? I guarantee you I know what you'd be doing. You'd be satisfying every single one of the luxuries that you wanted your entire life. You'd be instantly satisfied. You'd have immediate gratification, and you would become as corrupt as these people are, because you would use this power in the name of good, of course. No. He never says, I'm going golfing because I like to go golfing and I never could have gone golfing before. He doesn't say that. He says, no. I'm doing so much for the poor. You see, I'm helping so much of the world so much. I have to take a break. I have to take a vacation because it improves my efficiency to come back and help poor people. No, it's not about the poor. The Democrats are not about the poor. I'm going to generalize here because there are plenty of Republicans who are cut from the same mold. But in a nutshell, if you've got Republicans or businessmen, and Democrats are either lawyers or community activists or some form of politician, at least the businessman theoretically doesn't need this stuff from government because he can get it on his own, right? Does Donald Trump, Does Donald Trump strike you as the kind of person who's impressed by flying in a big private jet? He doesn't impress me that way. I think he's been flying in beautiful private jets for the last 25, 30, 40 years, something like that. So in any event, here's what's going on. This Trump election was a thunderbolt. After 2 terms of owning the Justice Department and then owning the FBI, which is part of the Justice Department, owning the IRS, owning NSA, all of it. After all of this stuff and all these promises and these fat jobs and these public sector retirement plans, after all of this, a lightning bolt comes out of the sky, and all of these people who make a living off of our taxes, all of these administrators, junior deputy assistants and this, and all of the people who are the assistant water manager for Fontana who's retiring or whatever on $200,000 a year, all of them are looking around and they're going, wait a minute, now hold on. We thought that we had this situation sorted out. Where did this thing come from? That's why progressives can't stand it. That's why progressives can't accept it. They can't accept it because it's not according to the script. The script is progressivism until forever. Progressivism forever, which means that more and more control by fewer and fewer people over the rest of people, and we're going to hand them out the things that they are asking for in order to vote for us. And once we've got their votes and there is no alternative and they don't know how to work, they can't read, then we'll give them less and less and less so we can keep more and more and more. Do you think the people in inner cities are being paid the total amount of money that's raised in their name? Do you actually believe that? We did this story about this guy who was a city councilman for Detroit. I'll just end on this because this is a subject I suspect we're going to be talking about for a long time. City councilman for Detroit basically said, low-level guy, he's on like the city commission or something, and he decides that it's in the interest of the people of Detroit. I'm pretty sure it was Detroit. It might have been Baltimore. It was one of those two. He decides that it's in the interest of Detroit that he has a brand new black Lincoln Navigator luxury SUV, that the people of Detroit need him in a black Lincoln Navigator, brand new, in order to help the education of the kids in Detroit, who 7% of whom read at an appropriate grade level. So this guy decided that this was in the interest of the poor people, so he ordered a brand new black Lincoln Navigator with all the trimmings and all of the extras. And when it came, it turned out that the Lincoln Navigator had gray leather seats, and he didn't want gray leather seats. He wanted black leather seats. So do you know what he did? He ordered a second black Lincoln Navigator, and this one had black leather the way he wanted it, and he paid $15,000 of state money that was designed to help kids in school, not for the car. The car was $100,000. He paid an additional $15,000 to get that second vehicle rushed to him. He paid $15,000 for expedited delivery of the one with the black leather instead of the gray leather, because we do have to get our priorities straight when we're helping the poor, don't we? I mean, we can't very well have the poor people of Detroit and the kids who can't read and the libraries that are trashed and all of the rest of the things that the Democrats do in the name of the poor. We can't possibly have those people, go on and get an education or anything unless you've got the right color leather on the inside of your new Lincoln Navigator, because if you didn't have the right color leather, the entire city would fall apart. These miserable, low-life bastards, these unbelievably merciless swine, that's what they are. They haven't got a heart, they haven't got a soul, they don't cast a reflection. They don't care. They don't care about America, they don't care about the poor, they don't care about the rich, they don't care about anything. They care about getting money that they can get only one way, and that is through politics. And that's it. They just understand, and look, it's not a theory on my part. You're all fine people. You're all hardworking people, or else you wouldn't be here listening to me. So let me just ask you something. If you wanted to travel around the world in a 4-engine jet, and you had 2 ways of doing it, which do you think would involve the least amount of work, the least amount of talent, and the least amount of intelligence? Starting a business, working from 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning until 11 at night, putting payroll on your own credit card, coming up with a business that made sense, that was about a product that people needed and didn't have yet, and then you had to worry about your competitors and cutting underneath these people and keeping everything lean and growing slowly and all the rest of it. And then 15, 20, 30, 40 years ago, assuming you're still afloat, because Inc. magazine, INC magazine, says that 96% of businesses fail in the first 10 years. So assuming you managed to navigate those waters the first 10 years, you start to grow a little bit, and finally, after 40 years of hard work, you have enough money to afford a Learjet or maybe even a Gulfstream or something like that. Do you think that's easier? Or do you think it's easier to be a guy who's racially perfect for the battle space that's been prepared for 60 years and all of this white guilt about things that white people didn't do and all the rest of it? Do you think it's easier to walk down a street and shake hands and knock on some doors and promise a few thousand people, if you elect me, I'm going to give you this? Which one of those do you think is easier? Because I got a theory. Which one is easier? And the way we beat these people is by doing what we're doing right now. We have got to call them on what they are. They don't love the poor. They don't care about the poor. They despise the poor. They want nothing to do with them. How do we know this? We know it through their actions. They can talk about the poor, but when they're finished, they don't go anywhere near the poor. Barack Obama never spends any time in a ghetto unless he needs a photo opportunity. Barack Obama talks about the poor, but he spends his time with the richest people on the planet. He spends his time in Hawaii, in the Hamptons, in Palm Beach, and Palm Springs. You don't want to be around the poor people. Are you kidding me? And Reverend Wright, who preaches about the poor and who preaches about the white man and goddamn America and our chickens are coming home to roost, this racist, horrible, goddamn national catastrophe of America and all of the horrors that we've inflicted on people and all of the injustice that we've inflicted on black America. When Reverend Wright is ready to retire, you don't think that Reverend Wright goes and lives in the community that he was preaching in, do you? I mean, come on, how much of a chump are you? Reverend Wright, as soon as he was finished with Trinity Church, basically went out of there with millions of dollars, got himself a very nice gated house in an almost exclusively white community, and that's where he lives. So don't tell me that these people care about the poor, because they don't care about the poor. They don't. It's their excuse. James Mulberry, who wrote a couple of great books, Whatever Happened to Penny Candy about economics, Whatever Happened to Justice about law, nailed it. I read this sentence and it knocked the wind out of me. I'll never forget it as long as I live. I'll never forget the experience of reading this sentence. He writes these books as Uncle Eric, as if he's sending a series of letters to his nephew. But basically, what he said was this. He said, no. You've got it entirely backwards. We do not raise money through taxes to fix social problems. We address social problems so that we can raise the money. Because how do we know that's true? That sounds a little strange. How do we know it's true? It's true because if it was the way that the government, that these ideologues who say the government is just full of good people, we know it's true because if it was the way that the progressives say it is, then we would have excellent roads and excellent schools, and city commissioners would drive around in 4 or 5 or 10 or 15-year-old Toyotas. If it were true what the progressives think, then we would have paved streets in Los Angeles and not people retiring on $250,000 a year. If it were true, Barack Obama would live up to the promises he made to poor people and fix the underclass in this country, which has been destroyed by 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 years of Democratic policies. But he doesn't do that. He goes golfing with the richest people and the whitest people in the world. And of all the things that Barack Obama has done to this country, I will tell you right now, the one thing that he's done to this country that makes me most angry, that I despise the most, that fills me most with not just anger, but just sheer disgust, is the fact that now, in America, in 2017, after 8 years of this man, now we have to start talking about race in a way that they talk about race, because it simply can't make any sense of modern politics anymore unless you talk about race. It pains me and makes me ill to say things like Reverend Wright went and lived in an all-white gated community. It's sickening to me. It's disgusting. But that's the dividends of how they do business. everything is race, everything is class, everything is sex, everything is gender, all of it, because that's how you divide up one people, e pluribus unum. I said I'm going to have some discipline about these shows. I went 10 minutes longer than I wanted to. We didn't cut this off for members. We gave the whole thing out for free. If you believe in these principles, and I do, I would just simply remind you that this Bill Whittle Live show is a product like any other product, and if you enjoy the product, we'd love to have you pay for it. If you want to go to billwhittle.com and click on Become a Member, we would certainly appreciate that. And I will tell you again what I hear from members, because I have to tell you, folks, this surprised me quite a bit. They say it's the best money they ever spent. They say it makes them feel great. I did not expect that, but that's what they say. In any event, that'll do it for Monday, the 6th. Is it the 6th? Neil, I lose track of time. What year is it? Is it 2017? Where's my jetpack? Where's my jetpack and my underwater cities? I want to get in my jetpack out of the office. 2017, for God's sakes. I want to go up to the roof, get my jetpack, fly my jetpack to the marina, get in my private submarine, and go down and live in my underwater hotel. That'll do it for us today. We will see you tomorrow. And there'll be more of this, and more and more and more. If you think the fight's over because we won the election, you're wrong. The fight is just starting now. These people did not ever expect to lose, and they're not going to sit and take it. They're going to do everything they can to destroy this republic, because they'd rather rule over the ruins than have a share in the part of the greatest country in the history of the world. This is Bill Whittle Live, and we'll see you tomorrow.